You are listening to The Evolved Masculine. Whether you are wanting more and better sex, more confidence, healthier relationships, or a greater understanding of and deeper connection to your masculinity, this is the podcast for you. I am your host, Destin Garrick. Welcome, everyone. This is Destin Garrick. I'm recording this on January 2nd of 2020, so Happy New Year. Though by the time you're listening to this, it might be quite some time later. We are entering into the 20s. Some people are starting to make the references back to the roaring 20s, but I want to say, while we may be inspired by the past, we don't need to be reverting to the past. It's about integrating and moving forward together. So rather than once more referring to this as the roaring 20s, I invite you to join me and a push that myself and some others are really trying to make, and refer to this as the soaring 20s. It is time for us to soar. You've been doing the work. You've been listening to this podcast. You've been on your own personal and spiritual developmental path and journey, committed to your own path of evolution. It is time to soar, to reach in and form right relationship with your power. Own that power. Integrate it with your heart, your compassion, your empathy, your desire to understand yourself and others. Your connection to source, spirit, universe, God, however you prefer to refer to it, be fully integrated, and let's soar. Be the man you're here to be. Rise up, step up, be inspired by the ever-increasing wave of empowered women to be more. Be more of what you know and I know we're both capable of being. So with that, I'm joined today by Stefanos Sifandos, who I happened to meet initially somewhat randomly in a gym. Well, looking at him is probably not that random for him, but a very well-built man, and clearly spends more time in a gym than I do. But turns out we have a lot in common. And more recently, I started kind of paying attention to his Instagram feed and been extremely impressed with his message, the way in which he has clearly been committed to this path, both personally as well as professionally, the way in which he feels very much in alignment with what he's speaking and how he's walking it, something that, I consider too rare. So when I see that, I see a brother. And I give credit where credit is due. I think that you're in for a treat today as we are joined by Stefanos Sifandos. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me, Destin. It's a kind introduction. I appreciate it, my friend.
Yeah. So, first of all, how do I pronounce your first name?
I think you did a good job, Stefanos.
Okay. Wasn't sure where the accent was. Stefanos.
That was good.
So you're calling in from Perth in Western Australia, yeah?
I am. I live in the US, though. I live in beautiful California, moving to Austin, Texas, though. But I'm visiting here, friends and family. Every time I'm back in Australia, my Australian accent gets more twangy, just comes on more because I'm surrounded by the Australians here, and I just can't help it. It's like when you go to another country, you start picking up the customs, or I'll pick up the customs again here of my Australian accent. So I'm hoping your audience can understand me.
Yeah, man. I'm originally from New York, and I've been out in California for 20 years now. So yeah. I've lost a lot of it, but put me back out there, or me spending time with my family, and boom, it starts to come out.
You're back to your roots, right? It begs the question. I wonder, do we ever change? Do we ever, that old version of self, does it ever shift, or do we simply choose to focus on a more dominant expression? But is that older aspect of self, or aspects of self, are they constantly within us and just accessible whenever we want? It's an interesting conversation for me at the moment.
Yeah, I love that you're raising that. my own book is coming out in a few days. Again, by the time
Yeah,
you're listening,
congratulations.
thank you. It'll be out, and
Love it.
so I spent a lot of time in that writing process, in deep
Mm,
reflection, and around these different major segments of my life, and how,
mm,
particularly when I was going through a major transformation in my life, and the intentional transformations into what I
mm.
call my erotic rock star persona and era, and then into that ending into the evolved masculine era. uh, I felt like I let the previous version of me die off and or killed it. But then but then in writing this book, it felt like maybe I did for a time, but this is my time of integration. All of these different parts of me are like coming back together, uh, so that they're accessible, they're in there. And that dying off or killing off, I think to a certain degree, is a certain form of repression, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I very much agree. I think whenever we're referring to old self and new self, what we're really referring to are just the parts of us that will always be with us. It's almost, I think when we experience anything in the world, we store it in somewhere in our bodies, in our memory, whether that be in the hippocampus, whether that be in another place in the body. At a cellular level, what we're storing everything. Just because we can't access it doesn't mean it's not there. Or we can't access it readily or consciously doesn't mean it's not there. And I think everything we experience really contributes to who we are in every present moment. And so every present moment that passes and becomes the past becomes an integral part of us. And it's part of who we are. It doesn't have to be part of our core expression. And I think killing off or dying off, I don't think it exists. And what you're getting at is, through your own experience and through your deeper reflections, you're realizing that as well. That's really what I've been realizing that the last few years is that all the parts of me that have made me today, quote unquote the good, quote unquote the bad, the negative, the positive, the parts that I didn't like, the parts that I feel shameful of, the parts that I don't know, that I don't wish to integrate, or that are not really desirable, that are undesirable parts. I really wouldn't be able to experience that part of me that I do appreciate, that I do really like, that I resonate with, if those parts didn't exist. And I think that's the sort of law of opposites, the law of polarity. And the more I really give thought to that, the more I realize, wow, we become empowered by the conscious choices that we make, and the depth and the willingness that we carry to go into the unconscious stuff that we know drives us, and that we then get to choose. We make the unconscious conscious, and then we get to choose, okay, I actually want to be this way. What do I need to do? Who do I need to be? How consistent do I need to be in this practice or this particular expression or sense of expression, to then make those changes? And I think that's where we become empowered, is
Yeah,
by
totally.
realizing that. I mean, in some aspect anyway, that's just some things that I'm thinking about at the moment, which are, I think, quite
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I feel you, which raises the important question here right now of, so who are you? What do you do in the world?
Yeah, who am I? Fuck, that's a good question. Look, there's consistency in who I am, and there's also a regular reinvention of who I am, I think, or adding a layer to, and that's part of this conversation of past, present, future. What I do in the world is I really believe I serve from a place of heart and a place of willingness. I feel a big part of my mission is to shift collective and individual dynamics around how we see ourselves, how we relate to each other, how we relate to ideas, how we relate to ourselves, to our journeys, our past, presents, futures, how we really integrate ourselves in relationships, and using or leveraging relationships, intimate relationships, as a catalyst for profound growth and expansion, which I think is one of the drivers and the prerogatives for being human. If we were to say, what are one of the reasons why we're here? I think there's reasons. I think there's layers to us. One of the reasons why we're here is growth and expansion, is to experience life and then integrate that, feel that, be with that, and then expand that. like take that to whatever your next level is. And there's not so much a linear ascension. It's a little bit different to that. We can use that as a more simple way of understanding us, but it's more literally this universal, just this expansion, right? And so it's filling ourselves up. And so why I'm here and what I do in the world is really assist people in getting out of their own way, but more so clearing out the clutter of their past. I'm a believer in that too many of us are attached to our past and we define ourselves by our past. Interesting what you said at the beginning about soaring 20s, roaring 20s, and I really like that. That's really cool. And I believe we are in an era of greater expansion more than ever for various reasons. I think technology plays a role in that. I think human development, brain development, spiritual consciousness, and who we are as a humanity and a collective, I think, is playing big parts in that.
So, Stefanos, I guess I'd like to make this a little bit more tangible. You speak of the helping look at things in a new way, the expansiveness of people and what they're capable of, and opening up more into their potential and possibilities. How does this look in the day-to-day life?
Yeah, I use many modalities in that, but essentially it's one-on-one coaching, it's men's coaching, it's women's coaching, it's relationship coaching. That's what it looks like. What it looks like is individual, group, couples. I speak from stage. I run immersive experiences and events, whether that's a 1-day immersive, 3-day, 7-day immersive experience. I do that with my wife. I do that by myself as well. I run deep shadow work with men too, helping them really clear the demons of the past, the attachments they have. I work with them on a psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical level. And relational level, teaching them how to relate with greater proficiency to people that matter in their lives. So not coming from places of aggression, coming from places of despair, or coming from past beliefs or limiting beliefs as well. And again, the modalities that I use are vary, but I take a Western psychological approach. I have a background in behavioral science, psychology, philosophy, and various other modalities. And I integrate that with elements of Eastern mysticism, shamanic work. I use breath work as a modality as well, not always, but it depends on the group and the individuals. That gives you a snapshot, some insight.
So again, you have a lot of overlap with my own path, background, training, etc. That I find very remarkable. How and why, or more why? I know that this type of a path is not for the faint of heart. It is, especially to go so deep into it and be so committed to it on both a personal level as well as in service to others.
Yeah.
What drives you? Why do you do this?
Yeah, I think what drove me initially was my own pain and being stuck in my own pain. And so I thought that I came to some conclusion for some reason that the mind was an access point to releasing myself from pain. Just having grown up in a very volatile, violent, abusive family dynamic. And then just as a teenager growing up in very violent circles as well, and being violent myself and aggressive myself, and just wanting to understand humans. And I thought maybe the brain and the mind is an access point. So I was really fascinated by human development and human behavior. And hence why
before you go there, so you speak of this really violent upbringing and the violence in your own life and your own expressions of violence. Assuming that that's not your current reality, how did that change? What was the first access point or shifting?
Yeah, I mean, the first access point was really leaving home. But by that time, the violence had definitely stopped. But there was, not really actually. My brother was a drug addict for quite some time, for probably 10 to 12 years, and bless him now, he's done so much deep work on himself as well. He's moved out of that. That was very difficult for the family. And so violence still continued past me moving out of home. But one of the ways I broke that, obviously, was removing myself from a very unhealthy, extreme environment. And that was useful because that was feeding into it. There was... Mm-hmm. Not only was there violence, between my mother and father, and then my mother and father on my brother and I, but there was also then violence between my brother and I because he was on drugs, and my father wasn't really taking the responsibility that he could as a father, and he was ill as well at the time. And so I assumed this role of father figure. All these family dynamics were playing out. And so, I reverted to what I knew best, which was, meet tension with violence, meet tension with aggression. And so that became the norm for us in many respects. And it took many years to break the core expression of that. But I'm not going to lie, man. I mean, there's still parts of me that get very agitated and frustrated, very aggressive as well, very tensile within myself. There are opportunities to go deeper into the layers of me and into the unresolved stuff that still resides there. It's just I've managed to deal with the core stuff. When you ask me how, man, fuck. A shit ton of personal development, going to different courses, studying under different people, counseling, psychology, inner work, meditation, deliberate time in solitude, awareness work around that, being in nature, going on quote unquote walkabouts, just being on my own, dealing with that stuff, but not before hurting a lot of people and hurting myself, I was never physically violent with my partners in relationships, but I was emotionally abusive, I was sarcastic, I was agitated consistently, I was frustrated, I was unfaithful in my relationships, I was living in the shadow a great deal. And so it took a lot of me realizing that, and that light being shone on my shadow self to really then make deeper changes and go down that journey. For me, my path is, when I committed to this journey, not really committed to it, not just sort of tinkering on the surface level and being superficial and tokenistic about it, when I really committed to it, I gave up my businesses at the time. I stopped working. I went into debt. I was using my credit card to survive. I was just committed to my work, and that's all I was doing. There were other points where obviously I didn't have to do that, and I was able to integrate deeper work in everyday life while still functioning in the world. But really, when I made that first initial commitment a number of years ago, I went all in on that. And so not everyone has to do that. That's just my path. But I learned a great deal.
How long ago was that?
About 6 years ago.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. About 6 years ago.
Yeah, wonderful. It is my hope and belief that more and more men are waking up to that, being willing to do that level of introspection and commit to the deep work. I've been doing work around men, masculinity, sexuality. Well, sexuality work for over 20 years, but particularly around men for 11, I think now. And the past few years, I mean, it's spiked. The level of activity, interest, other people, other professionals rising up to do this type of work it's ballooned. It grew so much compared to a decade ago, there were so many of these conversations that I was trying to have that I felt like I was talking to a brick wall, and now it's all around me.
Yeah. There's definitely a movement, particularly in men's work, around just growing our sense of awareness around who we are and what we're capable of and our potential. And a great deal, I mean, we hear a lot about toxic masculinity and so forth, but there's really a great deal of movement around positive masculine psychology as well, and positive men's work, healthy men's work, and people are willing to shift and change some of the old paradigms. We're coming from a place of, much of our generation and even the generation before me is coming from a place of having fathers that were absent and disconnected and unavailable in various ways, whether it was physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever. And so we're seeing older men in their 50s, 60s, 70s that are uninitiated men. They're not men that have gone through healthy rites of passage by other men in their community, and they haven't been socialized in that way, and they're looking for guidance too. And so we're seeing a massive movement in men's work, that's for sure. And I think, back to what I was saying earlier, because I want to tie a bow on that, is I immersed myself for a number of years and really sort of shut out the world without shutting out the world, and went through all the processes, the feelings of suicide and the contemplation of what does my life mean, and really going deep in all that. And we don't have to do that to feel freedom within ourselves. There are other ways to do that, having regular daily practice. I just want to make that very clear to people that it's accessible for every man. You don't think you have to negate all your responsibilities and give up your family and lose your life and disappear in the mountains for 25 years. It doesn't. I thought that was once the case, and I wanted to be a monk. I wanted to disappear and do that. But I realized that wasn't my path, and I want to make more of an impact in the world as opposed to being separated from it.
Yeah.
And also discover myself in relation to this world that so many of us live in as well. And if I want to disappear to the mountains, I can, but from a more healthier place, not from a place of running away. And so, within myself. And so it's very possible for all of us to just engage in regular, consistent practices that elevate our state of awareness, that give us an opportunity to be someone and do something different. And join a men's group once every 2 weeks, or once a week, or once a month, whatever, as a starting point, or create your own through Meetup, meetup.com, whatever. There's ways to do that if you really want to change your life circumstances.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So when you speak of men's groups, for the uninitiated, so to speak, what does that mean, and what do you really see as that being able to add to a man's life?
A group of guys getting together, keeping themselves accountable, sharing. That's it, expressing. That's it. In the simplest form, that's what a men's group is. In its simplest form. Group of guys getting together on a regular basis, talking, expressing, not unloading on their families or people that don't understand them. It's a safe place and a container for them to express, to be vulnerable, to share, to get fucking angry if they want, to be sad if they want, to ask questions if they want. It's just a group of men supporting each other with a very clear intention to support each other and grow, and however they define as growth.
So it sounds like that authenticity and willingness to be emotionally vulnerable is key through your lens as well.
That's part of it, and it's really men need men. We really, men will only understand men in a way men can, like women will only understand women in a way women can. That's not segregation. It's nothing to do with that. It's not separating us or dividing us. It's giving us an opportunity to understand each other through the familiar reflection of another that we can then bring into the world of diversity, of greater diversity. And then we can relate at a more profound, intimate level. And so men need men, and we've lost that. Men have evolved in tribes. Men have evolved in being together in bands and in tight groups where they've really been responsible for the survival of the community or the tribe or the group. We've lost that in today's society. We're more isolated than we ever have been, and not solitude. Solitude and isolation are very different. And so we're lonelier than we ever have been. Most men, I have a private men's group, there's about 2,000 something men in there. And one of the chief complaint or chief issue, should I say, that men face is that they're alone. They don't have anyone to speak to. That there's something biological that's pulling at our emotional heartstrings, but putting our biology there. We need to be in the presence of other healthy men that pull us forward, that inspire us, that challenge us, that help us understand ourselves, that give us a deeper level of self-awareness and help raise our self-esteem and our self-worth. And we're missing that in today's society. And so men need to be with other men in a healthy way. It's all part of the rites of passage as well that we're missing out. Men don't have a distinct biological rites of passage. Women do. They have their moon cycle and their menstrual cycle. And when they get that, they start to transition from girl to woman immediately, really, because everything changes for them. And there's a clear biological distinction there. Men don't have that. So we need to rely more on cultural rites of passage and transitions into manhood. And if we don't have them, we'll develop our own. And we're very good at developing our own, but we're not really that good. We're good at doing it because we have to, but what we'll do is we'll usually move to extremes because we're lost. We don't have the guidance. We don't have those elders, those uncles, those fathers, those brothers, those other older people in our lives directing us. And so we have to create our own. And that's why men need men. That's why men need fathers. That's why boys need fathers, healthy fathers, but not just one father. 2, 3, 4, 5 fathers. What I mean by that is maybe it's a biological father that has other brothers and friends with him that help guide that child. And so we need that guidance, especially as we're surging through massive biological changes internally. but they're not necessarily overtly distinct. So the testosterone, for example, that's just spiking as we're growing through different ages. We need that guidance because that affects our behavior, and we need to be regulated, so to speak.
Well, what do you say then about like a lot of the guidance that young men get isn't necessarily healthy guidance? You know, it is the misperceptions and wounds and, you know, toxic components that are being passed down generation to generation as well.
Yeah, I resonate with that. And I can't go back to what I said earlier about, older men seeking initiation these days. It's older men are trying to, we're looking to older men because naturally as a younger boy, as a younger adult, you're looking to age for wisdom because there's generally, I don't like to use the word should, or the term should, but there should be a correlation between age and wisdom and applied knowledge and so forth. But there's not so much. And so we're looking to quote unquote the wrong people or people that aren't adept or able to give that guidance as well. And so I think here that there's the opportunity to come together as a community, men, women, children, all of us coming together and bringing our value and bringing our wisdom. But first, so many men need to become more solid in their own selves. And so that's where the men's work or the men's focus comes in, and it becomes very useful and helpful for men to grow in that space.
And so again, like, where did you find the men's work itself? And was there a particular pre-existing organization that you got involved with?
Yeah, for me, I just started to explore. Again, an innate virtue that men carry is exploration. We wish to explore. We've explored the outer world. Largely men are responsible for the way the world, not the way the world is, but finding new lands. It's men that have traversed that. It's men that have fought wars, that have created new social and cultural dynamics. It's not about wrong or right or good or bad for a moment, but my point is men are just natural explorers, or at least we've developed it over many, many years, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. We've been responsible for extending the perimeter of our cave and keeping that safe by what we know, right? So we're innate explorers. So I just explored. The first organisation I came across naturally, I think for most people, was MKP, the Mankind Project. And so I went there and I immersed myself in that. And I was very fortunate as well when I was studying one of my degrees, my master's degree at university. One of my professors was not only, and I call him a great friend today, Professor Paul, but he was also in men's work. So, we got along well, and he then also showed me that path too and gave me more information as well. And he's written a book. He's coined a term called eco-masculinity. So I was very blessed to be, in the presence of certain people that could also inform me as well. And Paul was doing his inner work too at that time, and I joined, I didn't join him per se, but I joined that group for a period of time. And then, one thing always leads to another. Someone will listen to this podcast, we may mention a name, such as MKP, and says, oh, MKP. So then they go and look at MKP and they do a weekend retreat, or they do an immersive experience, they join their weekly groups, or they join their whatever. And then all of a sudden more information comes up. So it builds on itself. Yeah. But you've got to explore.
Wonderful. And so I know that Mankind Project does a lot of focus on that shadow work, like working with
it does.
those darker aspects of men and how to integrate them or move through them.
The unseen, repressed aspects of self,
And so you've brought that into your own work, it sounds like.
I was bringing that into my own work well before then because of I was studying psychology and at university and really having a keen interest in that. And that reinforced it in a different way as well. And then I spent a lot of time working individually with counselors and psychologists, spiritual healers and so forth. And that exposed me to other modalities as well, of looking at, okay, what are the parts of the psyche that we repress and how do we bring them out into the light? And what does that mean for this sense of wholeness that we're attempting to create in our world? Because we naturally would feel better if we're whole as opposed to feeling fractured and quote unquote broken. So yeah, MKP really assisted in helping me see the power of a group dynamic and being witnessed by other men, and really removing the veils of shame and guilt and repressed shame and guilt as well. So that was a very interesting initiation into deeper men's group work. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. I have a professional relationship with Boyson Hodges, the communications director of MKP, of Mankind Project. So I just got a testimonial blurb from him about my book, and we've been in conversation as well. Over the years, I've had quite a few men come through my various programs who have been involved with Mankind Project, including people who are held leadership positions within MKP. So I have not personally done their work, but everything that I know about them has been very, very positive.
Yeah. It's man, they've got a large following. They've been around for a long time. They're doing great things. Are they perfect in how they execute? I think it's a matter of opinion.
Sure.
Are they perfect?
I consider anything and everything, including myself. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So another thing that I know is that you refer to yourself as an advocate and proponent of sacred union. So can you share with us more about what that means?
Yeah, so what it means to me is, I'll give you a couple of examples. So I think for me, what drives sacred union are a few questions. The first is, I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, am I adding value to this relationship? Am I becoming a more profound human being because of who I'm being in this dynamic? Is my partner, this can apply to if you're in a non-monogamous relationship, or you're in a more open container where you have multiple partners, this applies to you as well. So you just ask the question for the people that are in your life that you're sharing deep intimacy with, that you consider to be deep intimacy. And if you're one of those people that feel and believe and are connected to 7.6 billion people, and you consider that to be deep intimacy, then you're probably going to have to live for a long time to go through each and single one of those people. But you'll figure it out, I'm sure. So it doesn't matter, who you're with, but who you're sharing deep intimacy with. Is you ask these questions around: am I adding value? Am I growing because of who I'm being in this relationship? Is that person growing because of who I'm being in this relationship? And then the inverse as well. Am I growing because of them in the relationship? And is our relationship adding value to our immediate community and our immediate friends and family and people that we value as well? And then is our relationship adding value to the world as well? And I think that's part of what sacred union is. The other aspects and components of sacred union are willingness. And willingness for me is a really big part. Willing to go to the places that are uncomfortable within the dynamic, to explore the light and the dark equally, to explore the shadow stuff, to be patient in the relationship, to attribute certain characteristics within the relationship on a regular basis, such as compassion, such as empathy, such as understanding. But importantly as well, to see that much of our behavior is driven by the past and is driven by unconscious means. And it's not necessarily that person right there in the present that's actually, it's not really them, it's aspects of the past. Because when we're pushed to our edge and we're pushed to a place where we're very uncomfortable, we feel unsafe, which often happens in relationship. That's one of for me, I really look at Harville Hendricks and how he defines relationships and the value and the one of the purposes of relationships is that, and I'm probably paraphrasing here a bit, but essentially adult intimate romantic relationships are reflections of our parental or primary caregiver relationships, and we will seek to fulfill what we didn't fulfill, and we will seek to understand what we couldn't understand, and what needs healing, both consciously and unconsciously, what we received and didn't receive during our developmental years. And we seem to replicate that in our intimate adult relationships to help heal out those wounds. Most people have experienced pain or suffering or trauma as a kid, even if it's not direct, maybe it's indirect, but we've interpreted. Most people, not everyone, of course. And there are various reasons for that. And so for me, sacred union is an exploration of that. But really,
an exploration of those wounds and traumas from childhood.
Yeah, doing that together, that's part of it. That's not all of it. That's definitely part of it. And a willingness to explore that and to see that we're reflections of each other and that we're here to heal, not heal each other, but heal ourselves through each other. And the intimate romantic partnership, because we share so much depth, is one of those relationships that can really bring that out in us. Yeah. And also the analogy I use now, I'm looking, and you could probably see actually the reflection is grey sky here, and there's some blue sky as well. And people are thinking in sacred union. And let me come back before I give this analogy. What we find is in most relationships, I feel most relationships end prematurely. And what I mean by prematurely is before the lessons and the wisdom is really gained in the relationship, before we can get a chance to grow and break old habits of the past and coping strategies that don't serve us anymore. Mm-hmm. And we do that because we come from fear. We feel unsafe and we think, well, this person's not for me. Let me end the relationship. Instead of looking a little bit deeper and saying, what's my role here? Where am I coming from? What are my unconscious drivers? What are my unconscious behaviors? And how are they showing up? And how can I be different to elicit a different response from them? So most of us don't go there. I know in my life, I ended relationships prematurely. Now, I'm not saying that those relationships are meant to stay forever. Some are not, reason, season, lifetime. However, I do believe we end them prematurely. And I think what sacred union does is, as we look at the sky and we look at the grey clouds, but we know that there's blue sky beyond that. We just have to weather the storm, and we have to see, well, what's causing the grey clouds and the rain and the thunder, and can we weather it out? And what's the value in doing so? And of course, this won't apply to everyone because sometimes.
So I was going to say I want to be a counter voice there, because in my own life path, I had the opposite problem.
So I'm going to revert back to what I said.
I tended to be in relationships for too long,
completely get
long
that.
Beyond the point where they were toxic for both of us.
And so that's a wounding.
I lack tools, right? I lack tools on what to do or how to move through with that pain.
And so what I recommend is something that I do regularly, and we in my relationship that we do regularly, is that we have external help. And so again, some relationships need to end. Most relationships need to come to a finality and a conclusion where two people go their separate ways. I think there's a premature ending where the lessons aren't grasped and we're just taking the old baggage into the next relationship. Same shit, different person. And that's an issue. Now, if what you're saying is where you've stayed in relationships too long, then that's interesting in your past. That's an interesting perspective for you, because that's insight into, okay, what's driving that? What's driving that wounding? Is it low self-worth? Is it having an extreme people pleaser mentality? Is it something else that's driving that?
Oh, no, it was definitely both of those things.
Yeah.
There may have been other factors also, but
absolutely
nailed her out the gate on that one.
But I was the same, Destin. I was the same, man. I stayed in relationships way past the use by date without making any changes. And my point is that even if I considered that relationship sacred union, let's just say, which I didn't, but let's just say I did, and I looked at that and I said, okay, what am I meant to learn here? How can I grow? How can my partner grow? How can I, as a man, how can I facilitate some leadership here of myself, sovereign leadership, and of the relationship? And I really feel if I'd done that from a place of integrity and authenticity, the relationship would have ended a lot earlier. So sacred union isn't a forever thing. Sacred union is a commitment to being a particular way until you both, in a very mature, evolved way, or elevated way, know that, okay, this relationship isn't for us anymore. And what you tend to find is there'll be that conscious uncoupling as opposed to this fucking distressing, very not amicable separation, which so many of my past relationships were very not amicable.
Likewise, it was, I'm in a very different part of life now, but it was the same pattern again and again in that regards. I wrote about this in the book as well, the sense of feeling like I was with the same woman again and again, just with a different face.
Yes.
And the same problems arising, just with slightly different flavors. And then ultimately recognizing, I'm the common denominator here. I can blame her, and if she wasn't this way or that way, or if she could but like she wasn't in my last relationship with the one before.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there, brother. I agree with you, man. I was that person too. And it takes a lot to check the ego and say, not maybe, but actually, this is me. I am the common denominator. And that I think that's part of sacred union for me is being willing to look at oneself and check the ego and just do that deeper inner work, past, present, future work, whatever that looks like.
So
But
how
there's a
does that relate
willingness
to the
there.
men who are single, who don't have a partner, or maybe even have a hard time like finding a partner?
Yeah, well, depending on if they're looking or not looking for a partner, I'll address it from that perspective. Nothing needs to stop you from bettering yourself as a man or as a human being. I mean, you don't have to be in a partnership to better yourself as a human being. I hold a belief that intimate partnership is a fast track way to growth and evolution. I think because of the intensity that it can bring up and the stuff the discomfort that a relationship can bring up, but also the immense comfort as well and the joy that it can bring up too, which is another reflection point. But you don't need that. I did a great deal of work not being in a relationship, being single and not wanting to be in a relationship either. Often for me, when I've wanted to be in a relationship, I've made that decision and I've conscious decision, whether it be in a meditation or whether it be just on deeper reflection, and I've just then moved in the relationship. But when I haven't wanted to be in a relationship, I wasn't in a relationship. So I was very clear on those decisions and saying, nope, I'm not going to be in a relationship and I don't want to be. And these are the reasons why, and I'm going to explore this. I wasn't just not being in a relationship because I was scared to be hurt or I was scared to hurt others and I was just hiding in fear and not doing any reflective work. I was active. And so you can still do that work. Join a men's group, talk with close friends, engage a professional or a coach, whether it be a psychologist or a counselor, explore the chasms of your psyche, understand yourself, be in solitude, go on retreats, go on adventure hikes or adventure journey, get to know yourself with intention, have a regular daily practice, whatever that is for you, whether that's meditation, whether that's reading 20 pages of a book, whether that's having weekly meetups with friends where you discuss the week and you discuss issues that you had, or you have someone you can speak to, you don't contain your pain inside. Maybe it's a writing practice, whatever it is. You can evolve yourself and grow. You don't need a partner to do that. So the healthier you are, because unresolved unconscious wounding attracts unresolved unconscious wounding. And so the clearer you are about yourself, the clearer the people are going to be in your environment, and the more you're going to attract of that which you are, which is clarity. And so you don't need a partner to grow in that way.
I relate to sacred union on two levels. There's the individual relationship, but then there's sort of this meta level. Like, I feel like I have been in a sacred relationship to woman, capital W, and the feminine, capital F, throughout my life. She has shown up in many different faces and bodies over the years, but I have been in this ongoing journey of my relationship to her, and through her, my relationship to myself. And so there are ways in which, like, I can't ever, at least in my own journey, I can't ever fully separate them. Even when I'm off on my own and in my own, I have been in my own personal journey, unattached or not in relationship or even not taking on lovers, there's still this element of, I have a relationship to her in the same way I have a relationship to my breath, same relationship, way I have a relationship to the universe or God. Like, it's or a relationship to existing in this life. There's, on one level, it's like there's no escaping from that. I have that. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. For me, my brother, and what I didn't mention earlier is that sacred union commences within self. And so there's a merging and a wholeness that we're integrating, or a sense, at least a sense of wholeness that we're integrating within ourselves. And I call that contrast dynamics. Some people, call it masculine, feminine, but it's just essentially harmonizing and making whole, or at least the perception, the feeling, and the connection to wholeness within oneself first. And there's no final place or destination for that. I think it's something that's constantly and consistently evolving. But the idea that we're attempting to merge ourselves within ourselves. And so what I mean by that in the most simplest terms is that we're not looking to someone else or something else outside of us to make us whole, make us feel complete, or heighten our sense of self-worth. Where it's more, yes, we're using elements of our environment because we're connected to our environment. The inner and the outer are connected, and in some capacity there can be one. However, the idea is to be more integrated within self before we look to someone else to make us whole. I don't think that's healthy. So I resonate, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, I really resonate with what you're saying, where there's this sacred relationship or union that we have with all these elements that matter to us in our outside world, but they're within first. And the idea of that and the feeling of that we create within ourselves, that's primary. Whether it be woman with capital W or small w, whether it be the essence of sexuality, we're integrating that in a sacred way within ourselves first and foremost, or at least it's continuous. There's an awareness of that.
And then through that, again, like as you show up as a more whole person, you're going to attract in a far more whole partner or partners.
Yes.
So you're in deep partnership, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
Yes. I consider myself to be in that at the moment. Yeah.
And how do you feel that affects your journey?
Being in partnership, I feel that being in partnership with this human being, with my beloved Christine I'm with now, has really enriched my life in so many ways. You know, I hit a crossroads a couple of years ago where I've been contemplating disappearing to the mountains since I was probably 15, 16, maybe 14, you know, when I really was exposed to some Eastern mysticism. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was because it was just really hard at home as a kid, and it was hard at school, and it was just tough for me at that time. And so that was a way of escaping, right? But as the years went on, I always had this when things got particularly too hard, I'm just going to disappear. And I would. I'd either end the relationship, or I'd go fucking traveling for a few months, or, you know, I'd get a one-way ticket somewhere. And I was doing that, but I wasn't fully committing to that sort of that monk path. I was just studying, you know, quite a great deal. But a couple of years ago, after, you know, a lot of deep exploration, where it was committed exploration, really more authentic, and it wasn't surface level stuff for me, I hit a crossroads, and the crossroads was this. I felt I had a number of choices. I wanted to grow. Like, I was hungry for growth and expansion. And I just wanted to open myself up more. And the way I felt I could do that in the most effective or proficient or honorable way for me, the most aligned way for me, was either to disappear into the mountains. And it was a very serious contemplation, because this time, for the first time in my life, I was coming from a healthier place. And really just go and be in solitude and learn from certain people or masters and so forth in the lineages. Either get hit by a bolt of lightning, literally, and survive, and something changes in my brain where I'm just open to this thing, because I had so many different experiences with Source, and so many different revelatory spiritual experiences per se, that if I had that lightning bolt hit me, maybe I'd be more open to that on a more regular basis. Which I didn't want to count on that, because I was a little bit codependent, in the sense that I was reliant on something else to happen to, you know, fulfill something within myself. I didn't really have mastery over that. I could just continue doing what I was doing, and I knew I would grow, but I don't know if I'd be satisfied with my growth. So I was single at that time, and really enjoying my life there as well. Or I would, with all the studies I had done and all the reflection work, I would immerse myself in a really conscious and aware relationship, and I knew that would elevate me and help me grow rapidly as well. And so I sat with that for a period of time. It was more than a couple of years ago, actually. So I sat with that for a period of time, and I really meditated with that. And I was with that. I wasn't desperate for an answer. I was very happy where I was in the trajectory and the path that I was. But I knew at some point in the future I'd want to make a very deliberate decision around that. And then one day in meditation, I opened my eyes, and I thought, okay, my heart's open. I'm ready to to be in a really aware, conscious relationship, whenever that may be. And a few days later, I was introduced to Christine.
How long ago was that?
That was early 2018.
Okay, so almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And how do you feel that being in that committed relationship, that sacred union, what do you feel that it's doing for your path? I mean, you're a young, successful, conscious, heart-centered man. Clearly, you have all the different makings of what would make you in high demand, might you say, amongst women. Like, what's the value for you in choosing to be in a deep, committed partnership?
I get to stop running from the nuances and the minutiae of the layers that I was really unable to unpack by myself. And I get to really experience a sense of freedom in commitment. And that's a really difficult thing to explain and understand. But for me, it's come from a place of I was so commitment phobic for most of my life. And I cleared up that before I actually met Christine, in terms of that being being an area of my life that I wanted to focus on, to not feel constricted just because I was in a relationship. And it was a lot of old past patterns and what I was exposed to and witnessing of my parents and other friends, as an adolescent, friends' parents, very similar, where the women felt very constricted, the men felt constricted in different ways. There was aberrance in the relationship. So my idea of, I didn't have healthy examples of relationships, essentially. And so undoing a lot of that and stepping into a more empowered sense of self and a more empowered place was very useful for me, and not seeing being in a relationship as something that was restricting me, but rather something that was empowering me. And that was a journey in and of itself, right? And so for me, being in this relationship, it's helped me just unpack more layers and break old patterns that just don't serve me anymore, that I don't really know I'd be able to do on my own. I think we're relational beings, right? We're social beings. We need each other. No man is an island. Totally. We're not, even if we're a monk or someone up in the mountain, we have a relationship with Earth. We have a relationship with that mountain. So we're relational beings. And so I really do feel, to some extent, we rely on each other and we need each other. It's not a point of do we need each other, it's how we need each other. And there's a spectrum of that, right? And we can either need each other in really unhealthy ways that we can consider extremely codependent, or we can be more interdependent and need each other from that place. And I think that's a healthier place to be. And I get to practice that in this dynamic. And I keep Christine accountable. She keeps me accountable. We help each other grow. There's a sincere love. I get to practice things that, I'll give you a real example, right? I'll give you a real example because this is happening now. And it's tangible and it's very real and raw for me at the moment. So my father, and I've done a lot of father work, right? A lot of father wounding work. And my father and I have a healthy relationship now. And it's taken years, but we have, to the extent that he can have a healthy relationship, but how I relate to it has really shifted, unfortunately.
Likewise.
I think that's why I saw you smiling before. They say,
Also a chapter in the book.
Yeah. So, to that extent, but that aside, my father lacked a great deal of compassion and empathy, and he was always very angry. Now, Christine's just moving through some health stuff at the moment. And what I've found is I've seen myself be very not compassionate and very not empathetic with her, which is not me. I'm generally quite a compassionate, empathetic person. Mm-hmm. But being back here in Perth, the environment has triggered stuff in me, right? And it's stuff that I'm here to deal with. And so I remember when I was younger, I would cough or have a cold, and my father would be so angry at me and tell me to shut up and be quiet and don't cough, you're too loud or whatever, right? And so, not that I'm telling Christine that she can't cough or anything like that, but I'm not I'm being impatient with her process and her journey, and I'm not honoring that. And so the reflection is now that I get to see that there are still parts of those that I haven't fully, parts of within me that I haven't fully integrated, haven't fully accepted. You know, the part of me that can be not compassionate, can be ruthless, and can be mean. And these are really difficult fucking things to take ownership of and understand. However, being in this relationship gives me that opportunity. Her being non-judgmental and compassionate with me whilst I'm being non-compassionate with her in certain ways. Of course, I'm caring for her and loving her, but I'm inconsistent in that. So now I get to look at I advocate consistency. I'm a big advocate of consistency in behavior and expression, how we show up. I'm not doing that. I'm going to take responsibility for that. Okay, great. Let me not beat myself up about it. How can I actually shift that? How can I step into consistency because it's something that I value? How can I step into compassion because it's something that I value? How can I take ownership and say, hand up, I haven't been compassionate. I'm sorry. Thank you for helping me see that. I want to hold you through what you're moving through and not be triggered by my old stuff because of the environment I'm in or because old stuff's coming up and not use that as an excuse. So it's a very real thing that's happening for me now. And so being in this relationship helps me clear that up, just another layer of that. Now, for me, in my opinion,
sorry, before we go, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for these past few minutes, honestly, are my favorite part of our conversation. When you just made it very real and tangible, you really modeled for us what that looks like, to take that level of accountability, to have a willingness to confront and really look at your own shit without defensiveness, but and be that level of vulnerable. One of the things I write about in the book is what I call powerful vulnerability, and you exemplified that so clearly, in that it shows a certain power within you to be that vulnerable, and then that vulnerability itself has a power in it, in that it has an impact on the people who are watching and listening, because you're saying what people don't say. You're speaking the unspeakable.
Yeah.
You're exposing that which people hide and feel shame around.
It's the shadow stuff, yeah. Yeah, I've been hidden that for so long, my man. And so let me be very honest again, is I'm a resistant fucker. I'm stubborn, man. It works for me. My resilience works for me and it works against me. And when it works against me, it causes a great deal of distress in the people that are in my life and in my own life as well. And you know, I'm having tears well up in the back of my eyes right now because I'm thinking about how stubborn and reluctant I've been to look at this side of me it's been a couple of weeks. It's not like it was before, like years, but it's been a couple of weeks where I've really caused distress to Christine and to myself because I've been so angry at myself. And so I go into the cycles, like I was so angry at myself for not being compassionate, and then I would just keep being non-compassionate because I was not exhibiting compassion to myself. And so, you know, I had to sit down. We didn't hit breaking point in any capacity, but we hit some intensity, and I had to sit down and just go, oh, I see what's happening, Christine. I'm sorry. Here's the process I'm going through. I was isolating myself in the process, which was an old habit of mine, instead of actually putting out my hand and saying, hey, I need some help, or hey, I just need you to bear with me. I mean, I wasn't doing that. I was just being a recluse. I wasn't taking ownership of it until I did.
And may this be an invitation and a reminder and hopefully inspiration for the men listening to this, that this is the fruits of your labor. When we're speaking about the all-in commitment to that path of evolution, personal transformation, here you are speaking about how it took you a couple of weeks to really get this. Again, these are things that people battle with and resist, and for their entire life sometimes, certainly for years, if not decades.
Yes.
So the walking of the path does not mean that you're done, you have no more shit, everything's good from here on out, but you do become aware quicker and quicker. You do have an ability to transform it or shift it faster and faster.
Yeah, and sometimes, Destin, I get it in a minute or an hour. Sometimes it takes me a month. And there are more layers to this. And the moment, I'll tell you something though, man, the moment I had that very real conversation with Christine, because part of the issue with her was that, why aren't you being willing, Steph? Why aren't you working on your stuff? We've made this commitment. You're not working on your stuff. There's something going on here that's triggering you, and it's affecting me, and it's affecting you, and it's affecting us, and you're not working on it. And then I'd be angry at her. And I'd say, I am working on it. I am processing it. And I was. But I wasn't communicating that to her. And the moment, I've got to be honest with you, the moment that I communicated the detail of that to her, to give her, because she just wanted to feel safe. She wanted to feel that I am doing that work and that I am consistent in my behavior around that and in my commitments around that. And the moment I expressed to her in detail everything that was going on within me was the moment that all of that lifted, and was immediately I was able to slip into more authentic compassion, because I'd shared that with my partner and I saw her see me, and I saw her not only see me, but again, meet me with non-judgment and compassion, and I saw her soften massively.
So there's two things I've noticed. First of all, that's huge. You know what you just described. You know, that rather than just feel like you've got to do this all on your own, you just got to like shut up and do that inner work, and then like when you've got it all figured out, then you can talk to her about it maybe.
Yep.
But really allowing yourself to be vulnerable about your process and where you're in, and really sharing the authentic truth of the moment actually allowed her to soften, helped her trust in you more fully in that as well, and far less upset on her side then as well. Yep. The other thing I took note of, though, is also an example, though, of the quality of the woman that you are with and that you attracted, because you've been so committed to this path. The woman at your side as well, she can have that kind of conversation with you.
Yep. Big part of it.
Yeah. So
big part of it. Massive commendation to her. Yeah, because I wouldn't be able to, if I had a partner that hadn't done her inner work, that wasn't so massively triggered to the point where she was reactive, not responsive, which is another part of, for me, in my opinion, conscious relationships, where we're more responsive as opposed to reactive. So we're coming more from the present as opposed to the past. I wouldn't have been able to get there either. So a big part of that, and that's the relational aspect, is because of her as well, and her role and how she chose to show up.
Yeah, awesome. So I've been with my wife now for about 6 years, I think, and married for Amazing. A bit over 2. Thank you. And known each other for 16 now. Wow. And I'm with her. I'm committed to her. I'm married to her because she makes me a better man. Yeah. The longer I'm with her, the better that I am. I'm inspired to to continuously work on myself and to be a better man. I'm able to have these types of conversations like what you just described in a way that I was never able to successfully have in previous relationships without it automatically going into defensiveness or pointing fingers or blaming. And again, it's not like none of that has ever shown up in our relationship. It has.
Of course.
Old patterns. But we are also both committed to not let that rule us.
I get that. I hear that, man. That's really honorable and admirable and very inspiring as well. I say that often, like Christine, for me, she's my muse, you know. She's not the only thing that's a muse in my life, but she's my primary muse. She really inspires me at such deep levels and just makes me I feel a more profound human being on this planet. And from the time that I've known her to now, I know I'm noticeably a far more remarkable human being because of the dynamic that we're in, because of how she chooses to show up.
I'd like to ask you something. It might be a little sensitive, but my ears have heard around it twice so far. Yeah. So even here, when you mentioned her being your muse, then you sort of did a little equivocation of, she's not my only muse. There's da-da-da-da-da. And like, what is that equivocation? Like, what was it that drove that need to really clarify, when I call her my muse, she's not my only muse?
I have to think about that. Maybe it would come from a place of, maybe it's some old stuff, not wanting to be completely identified as, because I really like my individuality. Maybe it's some old stuff coming up that still associates being in a relationship with some form of loss of identity, maybe. So by saying that, I'm processing this in real time, so give me some space here.
I love it. I think it's very valuable. Keep going.
So I'm just going to sense of individuality. Yeah, I witnessed my mother and my father, but largely my mother having lost her identity massively in her world, being in relationship with my father, and her overtly stating that as well. And so maybe there's parts of me that still think being in an intimate relationship is a loss of identity. So by saying, oh, I have other muses means that it's exemplifying, hey, I'm still an individual. Maybe that's part of it. But, if I just step out of that for a moment and just get really clear, she's just my fucking muse. And I'm a more powerful man because of it, because of how I choose to show up in relation to her. She just fucking inspires me.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. Very inspiring. And again, thank you for sharing that process with us. I think that these moments of that level of present-based authenticity is where you shared the deepest value with our listeners today, and with me personally as well.
No, thanks, man. Like I said to you, nothing's off limits. Like and I really meant that. There's nothing off limits, and no matter how uncomfortable something may be, I want to practice what I preach, and I want to be really willing to go there because I know it just makes me a more available man as well.
Yeah, these are the things that I picked up in, digitally stalking you for a minute. It was like,
I appreciate that feedback, man.
I think this guy is the real deal. And again, like I'm very critical of what's out there because I don't think that about most.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that feedback, and I appreciate moments like this as well, because I think that no matter how uncomfortable they are, they just make us better human beings. They're opportunities. It's opportunities for growth. I mean, and this year, just as for a full circle moment, if you're wondering what a really healthy men's group can do, it's fucking this right here. Destin just pulled me forward. Destin just said, hey, I noticed something. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's everything, but this is just what I've noticed. What are your thoughts, Steph? And me doing my best to step out of my ego and saying, no, I know what you're talking about, Destin. Fuck, that's not me. It's, I said, well, hold on a second. Maybe he's got a point here. Let me look at it. Let me feel into it. And we just went through that process. I mean, that's what a healthy men's group gets to do for you, And now Destin just helped me reveal a layer of myself. Maybe the subtleties where I'm still attached to an old version or persona of myself that I can just choose to let go now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more.
Fucking massive. Yeah,
and I think it's the same thing. The first time my ears picked it up, then I kind of let it go, and I mentioned now the second time. The first time was when I first asked you about Christine, and again, there was a slight equivocation when you spoke of her. You spoke of being with her right now, the woman I'm with right now, and I'm like, okay. I mean, it felt to me like I need to verbally express that there's a certain kind of commitment here, but it's a certain kind of commitment, and right now, and who knows what tomorrow will bring.
No. I'm not one of those people.
That's kind of how it landed.
No, that wasn't the intention or the energy behind that. No, I'm not someone that will say, hey, we're committed today, but tomorrow I may wake up and not be committed. I mean, that may happen. That may happen for her, but that's not how we think. That's not how I think. That's not the approach I take to this relationship. But for me, the union that we engage in, the witnessing in front of the marriage, the witnessing in front of our friends and family and dearest ones, and unfortunately there were some loved ones that couldn't make that, but because we had destination wedding, it was one of the most beautiful fucking experience of my life. That witnessing, that's a very deep commitment for me, and I'm fucking all in onto that. And it was really, for me, that was symbolic of the work that I've done and the place that I'm at and where I'm really ready to be. Sure,
Yeah,
maybe
I
some
saw
of that.
some gorgeous pictures of that, which is
Yeah,
why
fucking
I was
epic,
actually a
eh?
little surprised when I kind of heard something in the
No,
way that
I'm
you
not.
initially described it.
I don't come from that place. It's definitely not a place that I come from. I've explored that, and I can be so sure about that because I've really explored that within myself.
Mhm.
And Christine and I have had very open conversations about we're choosing to really be committed to each other. I mean, this is, we have arguments about who's going to die first. Like I said, you're definitely going to die before me. I'm going to outlive you, so you need to do more things. We're joking things like that, and she'll say, no, you're going to die first because you're too intense in the things that you do. So we have laughed about that, right? So, no, we're very clear on. Have you seen that movie Bicentennial Man? Robin
No,
Williams.
I was gonna say it's Robin Williams, so yeah.
Fucking beautiful movie. It's such a
Mm.
beautiful movie for so many reasons. For so many reasons, but the ends. Oh, I can't spoil it. Is this? Oh, I can't spoil it now. Damn, I don't because I don't want to spoil it if people haven't seen it. It's really worth watching.
All right,
I
I'll
don't want
check
to
and
spoil
see
it,
if
but
it's on
there's a
Netflix or
scene
something.
there that at the end that really, I think it is on Netflix, that really I feel resembles the commitment, the level of commitment where Christine and I are at, and
Yeah.
what the commitment that we've made to each other and to this path as well, and the value that not only we're adding to each other's journeys and our own individual journeys, but also to the world. And I don't mean that from an egoic way. I just mean that I really believe that her and I meeting, it's a meant to be thing, especially when I look at the circumstance around how we met, being on opposite sides of the world, and the introduction that was made to us by mutual friends that I had just met because we were part of a startup, which all of these things had to happen. I just think it's really beautifully serendipitous. And I'm fucking so all in this relationship. And that for me, that marriage in Mykonos it was really everything for me in that sense. Yeah.
That's gorgeous, man. That's gorgeous. I'm going to invite you when this episode goes live to just re-listen to the beginning part of this because I feel like
Of course.
the energetic quality to how you just described it now and how I felt that it got introduced in feels quite different to me.
Yeah.
And again, I'll re-listen also. Maybe it was me.
Yeah, no, I'll re-listen, man. Definitely, for me, that is not the intention. It's something that's very in my sphere. But again, the subtleties of the psyche.
Totally.
I'm not immune. I'm not immune to them. Let's put it that way.
Nor am I.
Yeah.
Nor am I.
Not immune to them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's years ago. I thought that in order for me to do what I felt like I was called to do in the world, I had to be perfect.
Yeah.
Thought I had to be perfect. I have to be the perfect embodiment of what have you. And now I really made a point of really laying out in my book and just through my messaging again and again that look, even yes, I built this brand and message around the evolved masculine, not because I am this perfect embodiment of the evolved masculine. Rather, it is my guidepost. It is something that I spent years and a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources trying to understand and pull from. And now it helps me. It helps me be a better and better man. And I find a lot of other men find it very valuable too. So here, may it be a guidepost for you as well. Take what serves you, leave behind what doesn't.
Yep, I completely resonate with that.
And it's way less stressful to me than when I thought I had to be perfect all the time.
Definitely don't need to be perfect. That's been a tough lesson for me in my life is having, and I know where a lot of that comes from. And just to make a connection for the viewers is because my father was so hard on me as a child, demanding perfection, but not even demanding perfection, more so never happy and never satisfied. Almost the inverse of that, which made me believe I made that mean that I have to be perfect. But you know what? You're never gonna satisfy someone or something that just hasn't got a capacity to love themselves either. And so I learned that the in a painful way, but that self-worth piece, a big part of that is tied to, hey, I don't need to be perfect. You just don't, I really don't. And there's actually this beautiful perfection in imperfection.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So do you have any last words that you want to share with our audience?
I just appreciate being here. I appreciate having deep conversations with people that are just willing to go there, and people that are willing to listen as well. And if I can say anything, it's just willingness. Willingness is a big thing for me. It's played a massive role in my life in terms of how it's helped me grow. And if there's any piece of guidance that I can give anyone, it's just be willing to traverse the shadow, be willing to go to the uncomfortable places, be willing to celebrate your joys, be willing to do what's new, be willing to readdress something that maybe you thought you've dealt with, but maybe there's some more layers there. Just be willing, be willing to be open-hearted and open-minded. I think there's a great deal of value in doing that, being that.
I love that, man. Willingness, be willing. Yeah. And how can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. So my website, stefanosifandos.com, or any of my social media channels, Stefanos Sifandos.
And we'll put links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being on, for your willingness to show up, to be powerfully vulnerable, to be so authentic, to be able to go into those difficult places. There were a couple times where I asked the uncomfortable questions and you didn't bat an eye. You're fully willing. And again, honestly, I think that's the most impactful part for many of our listeners who may have never had a model of any such way of being before.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the way you show up in the world as well, Destin. It means a great deal to me. And I think for me, man, the more of us that are just on this path of awareness, irrespective of what we do in the world, you could be sitting behind a desk 10 hours a day working in the oil and gas industry, but if you're willing to grow and you've got awareness, then I think that's adding value to the world, man. So thank you for the work that you do as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Stefanos. Thank you for listening to the Evolved Masculine podcast. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a comment to help other men discover this show and help the Evolved Masculine movement spread. It really does help. I want you to do more than simply consume content, but rather to embody a new way of being and radically transform your life for the better. Join us in the Evolved Masculine membership community, a brotherhood of men who are committed to being the best men that we can be. Crystallize a vision of your most evolved masculine self and implement the tools to take him out of the idea realm and begin embodying him now. Reprogram your sexuality and deepen your understanding of women and the feminine. Learn more and join us at evolvedmasculine.com/membership. I believe in you.